Hello dear students, welcome back after Diwali vacation. I know you must have enjoyed the vacation very well. And now it's time to get back to studies with the energy and enthusiasm. So from today we'll start our sessions. And the first subject we will start with is history. We'll start with chapter 3, ruling the countryside, and is session 1. See, the first image shows there is some document exchanged between the Indian ruler and the British. So let's start. On 12th August 1765, the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II granted the Diwani rights of Bengal to East India Company. This was granted after Battle of Buxar in 1764. This was signed by Shah Alam II and Robert Clive. Now the company became the chief financial administrator of Bengal. When the company became achieved the right of Diwani, the responsibility of administrating the land and organizing its revenue also came on the shoulders of the company. Not only this, it had to ensure that it could buy the products it needed at cheaper rates and sell them at higher rates. Over the years, the company had also learned how to play safe in an unknown land, that is India. Now here what I mean is the company had to specify those who are the early rulers of the countryside. It was not possible to eliminate them completely. So the company did the following: organize its revenue resources to yield crops it needed, colonizing the countryside. That's what we are going to study further in this chapter. So, students, the East India Company became the Diwan of Bengal on 12th August 1765. As Diwan, the company became the chief financial administrator of the territory under its control. The company needed to administer the land and organize its revenue resources. It needed to be done in a way that could yield enough revenue to meet the growing expenses of the company. Revenue of the company. The company's aim was to increase the revenue to buy fine cotton and silk cloth as cheaper as possible. Within a span of 5 years, the value of goods bought by the company in Bengal doubled. The company became, before 1865, purchased goods in India by importing gold and silver from Britain. Now it was financed by the revenue collected in Bengal. Artisanal production was in decline. The agricultural cultivation showed sign of collapse. There in 1770, a terrible famine killed 10 million people in Bengal. You can see the images for referral. So students, though the company became Diwan of Bengal province, still it was working as a trading company. It was not interested in setting up an any regular system of assessment and a collection of revenue. Their main aim was to increase revenue so that they have plenty of money to buy cotton and silk. But the prices of the goods had increased so far. Now, as we have studied in previous chapters, that earlier the company was dependent upon the inflow of gold and silver from Britain for purchasing good in India, but after 1765 things changed and now the revenue from Bengal was enough to purchase goods. But there was a big problem arose. What was this problem? Economy of Bengal faced a deep crisis because of the following. Artisans left Bengal as they were being forced by the company to sell their products at cheaper rate. Peasants were unable to pay the heavy dues laid on them. Agriculture was collapsing. Big famine of 1770 hit in Bengal. This killed around 10 million population there, washing out about one third of the population of Bengal. As such incidents took place which ruined the economy heavily, the company then felt the need of improving the agriculture. The need of improve agriculture. In 1793, the company introduced the permanent settlement. By the terms of the settlement, the Rajas and Talukdars were recognized as zamindars, who were asked to collect rent from the peasants and pay revenue to the company. The amount to be paid was fixed permanently. This settlement could ensure a regular flow of revenue into the company's coffers and at the same time encourage the zamindars to invest in improving the land. So, most of the company officials were on the view that there was a great need of investing in land and agriculture in order to improve it, because the fall in agriculture was resulting into great loss of revenue to the company. Therefore, after long thinking, in 1793, the company took the decision of introducing the revenue collection method known as permanent settlement. As per the settlement, the Rajas and Talukdars were now known as the Zamindars, and they had to collect the rent from peasants, which was fixed permanently by the Britishers. The main aim behind this was the zamindars will only pay the fixed amount to Britishers, since the demand of the revenue will not increase, and will invest into improvement of agriculture to generate extra income for themselves. It did not go as per the plan, and the following problems arose. What were the problems? The permanent settlement created problems. Soon the company officials discovered that the zamindars were not investing in the improvement of land because the fixed revenue was very high. By the first decade of the 19th century, the situation changed. The prices in the market rose and cultivation slowly expanded. Even then, the zamindars were not interested in improving the land. In the villages, the cultivator found the system extremely oppressive. The rent they paid to the zamindar was high, so they took a loan from the moneylender, and when they failed to pay the rent, they were evicted from the land. See, the problem after the settlement was the permanent settlement, however, did not prove to be that useful as thought by the company. Soon it was discovered that zamindars were not investing in the improvement of land because the rent was so high that it became impossible for the zamindars to pay it off. As a result, they were deprived of zamindaris. Even the zamindaris were also put on auction by the company. Meanwhile, something new was noticed by the company, that the situation was changing as per the prices of the goods were increasing, and slowly but gradually the agriculture was also expanding. This led to the benefit of zamindars, but for the company it remained same as the revenue was fixed. Even the zamindars were not keen to invest the improvement of agriculture because they were gaining a lot without putting any efforts in the form of the rent that they obtained from the peasants. On the other hand, the cultivators found it extremely oppressive as they had to pay very high rent to zamindars, though they did not have ownership over the land that they worked on. Now that we know the problems being faced by the company regarding generation of revenue, we should now move on the solution it came up with. The nerve system was devised. The company officials decided to change the system of revenue. Holt Mackenzie devised the new system which came into effect in 1822. Under his directions, collectors went from village to village, inspecting the land, measuring the fields, and recording the customs and the rights to different groups. The estimated revenue of each plot within a village was added up to calculate the revenue that each village, that is Mahal, had to pay. This demanded this demand was to be revised periodically, not permanently fixed. The charge of collecting the revenue and paying it to the company was given to the village headman rather than the zamindar. This system came to be known as the Mahalwari system. So students, by the early 19th century, many of the company officials felt that it was impossible for the company to survive on the fixed amount of rent that was getting, because now the expenses of the company had increased. They decided to develop a new method of revenue collection, that was Mahalwari system. In 1822, an Englishman called Holt Mackenzie felt that village was an important social institution for North Indian society and needed to be preserved. Therefore, he developed a new method of revenue collection known as Mahalwari system. In this system, following steps were taken. Officers went to different villages for inspection of lands. Fields were measured. Customs and rights of the people were recorded. Estimated revenue of each plot within the village was added up to calculate the revenue that each village or mahal had to pay. The revenue was not permanently fixed. It was to be revised periodically. Instead of zamindars, the village headman had made was made responsible of collecting the paying the revenue to the company. While Maharwari system of revenue collection was introduced in the northern part of the country, another method came into use in the southern part of India. This was famously known as Rayatwari system or Munro system. So let's know about Rayatwari system or Munro system. In the British territories in the south, a new system was devised known as the Rayatwari or Rayatwari. This system was gradually extended all over South India. The settlement had to be made directly with the cultivators or rights who had tilled the land for generations. Their fields had to be carefully and separately surveyed before the revenue assessment was made. The southern part of India also Britishers felt that permanent settlement method was not beneficial enough, and so Thomas Munro, Governor of Madras 1819 to 26, developed a new method of revenue collection known as Rayatwari system. This system was actually based on the method which was applied by Captain Alexander Reid on a small scale in some of the areas which were won over by the company after defeating Tipu Sultan. Rights were refers to the cultivators. As there was absence of zamindars in South India, both Reid and Munro decided to directly deal with the rights of the cultivators who were tilling the land from generations. Under this, the field of rights were carefully measured and assessed. Okay, now we know the difference between all the three types of revenues collection. We know the Rayatwari system, was also introduced by the Britishers, but soon a new problem arose. What was that? Let's find out. All was not well. In order to increase the income from land, revenue officials fixed high revenue demand. Peasants were unable to pay, riots fled the countryside, and villages became deserted in many regions. So, under the rights system, peasants were charged with a very high rate of taxes. They started deserting the countryside as it became impossible for them to pay tax. Many of the company officers were of the view that the new system of collection will help peasants in becoming rich, but this never happened. Britishers were not solely dependent on the revenue generation from India. Territories in the form of taxes they levied, but they also decided to use the crops of the country in order to earn profit in the trading business. This we will study further. Crops from Europe. By the late 18th century, the company tried to expand the cultivation of opium and indigo. The company forced cultivators in various parts of India to produce other crops: jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in the United Provinces, now Uttar Pradesh, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, rice in Madras. So, by the late 18th century, Britishers tried to expand the cultivation of opium and indigo in various parts of India. They also forced the cultivators to grow various other crops such as jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in UP, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, rice in Madras. So basically, the more emphasis was laid on cultivation of indigo, but why was it so important to cultivate indigo? First of all, you should know what indigo is and why it is used. In the image, you can see the plant, the color, and color pencils. So basically, indigo is a plant from which a blue powder is derived, and this is used to dye clothes in blue, or as we say, indigo color. Indigo was so important because it can only be grown in tropical climate. So climate of India was suitable for its growth. India was the main exporter of indigo. It was of high demand in Europe because it gave a rich blue color to be used for dyeing the clothes. In Europe, a plant named wood was cultivated which was used for dyeing clothes, but the color that it gave was not so rich, resulting into the high demand of indigo in Europe. One interesting fact about wood and indigo is that the wood cultivators were so worried about the tough competition they were facing because of indigo that they pressurized their representative governments to ban the import of indigo. Now only English, but not only English, but the French in Caribbean island, the Portuguese in Brazil, and the Spanish in Venezuela also started cultivating indigo plants. While the demand for indigo was increasing, its supply fell to half between 1783 and 1789 due to various reasons. As there was less supply, the British dyers became keener to procure indigo, and at this point they turned to India to meet their needs. So students, one more thing I would like to tell you, apart from what is mentioned in the textbook or the syllabus, indigo is what you can see. Indigo color is a dark blue color. In the image 3, there is a denim, a jeans which is blue colored. You know, It is an indigo blue color that is used for dyeing jeans. It's very interesting to know this indigo is still used to dye. Basically, the jeans that you wear, your favorite cloth, jeans, is dyed with this indigo color. And better quality of indigo gives a better blue and richer blue look to the denim or the jeans that you wear. Isn't it interesting to know? So, why the demand for Indian indigo? Indigo was so important because it was only be grown in tropical climate. So the climate of India was suitable for its growth. India was the main exporter of indigo. It was on high demand in Europe because it gave a rich blue color to be used for dyeing clothes. Britain turned to India. The demand for indigo was raised day by day in Europe. Therefore, the company decided to expand indigo cultivation in India. Bengal was the largest exporter of indigo to the Britain. In 1810, about 95% of the indigo imported by Britain was from Bengal. As the indigo trade grew, many of the commercial agents and company officials started investing in indigo business. As this was a profitable business, many Englishmen settled in India and became indigo planters. Even loans were granted by the company and the banks of the indigo cultivation. How indigo was cultivated? Indigo was cultivated under two systems. They were as follows: niche and rhyte. Niche. In this system, the planter produced indigo on the land which was under his control. Either he was the owner of, or he was owner, or he had rented it for indigo cultivation. But the niche cultivators found it difficult to grow indigo as it required a large fertile area, which was not easily available as most of the land was densely populated. Even laborers were not available sometimes as they were busy with the rice cultivation. Thus, they were not interested in growing indigo anymore. Rhyte. Under the rhyte system, the planters entered into the contract with the rhytes or village headmen, sometimes forcibly. According to the contract, 25% of the land was exclusively kept for the cultivation of indigo and loans were provided for its cultivation. The planter used to provide the seed and the drill of the farmer, and he in return had to take care of the plants. But soon the Wrights realized that this system was not an easy one because they got trapped in the cycle of loans which were unending, and in the income they received through the indigo plantation was also very merge. Even the fertility of the land deteriorated. The land became unfit for the growth of rice after the cultivation of indigo. As the system of indigo plantation was very oppressive, all the peasants became rebellious. The planters under the Rhyte system were forced to sign a contract, an agreement, that is satta. Those who signed the contract got cash and advance from the planters or at low rates of interest to produce indigo. When the harvested crop was delivered to the planter, a new loan was sanctioned and the cycle started all over again. Peasants soon realized how the loan system was. After an indigo harvest, the land could not be sown with rice. The Blue Rebellion and after. In March 1859, a rebellion broke in Bengal. Many of the Wrights refused to pay rents to the peasants. Not only this, they attacked indigo factories. At some places, the village headmen who were forced to enter into a contract by the planters also supported this rebellion. Peasants at some places thought that they could get support from the Britishers, but it was not so, as the Britishers became cautious of the revolt of 1857. So they brought military for the safeguarding planters in indigo districts. Queen Victoria ordered Magistrate of Barasat, Ashley Eden, to issue a notice stating that Wrights would not be forced to enter into indigo contracts. An indigo commission was set up to look into the matter. The commission came up with the following conclusions. The planters were found guilty. The planters were forcing Wrights to enter into contract. Indigo cultivation was not profitable for Wrights. The Wrights were asked to fulfill the existing contract, but they got the right to refuse the indigo cultivation in future. After the revolt, as production of indigo came to an end in Bengal, planters shifted to Bihar. There also they faced similar revolt known as Champaran revolt in year 1917, which was supported by Mahatma Gandhi. So students, riots in Bengal refused to grow indigo. People who worked for the planters were socially boycotted, and the Gomastas and agents of planters who came to collect rent were beaten up. The Bengal riots had the support of the local zamindars and village headmen in their rebellion against the planters. The indigo peasants believed that the British government would support them in their struggle against the planters. After the revolt of 1857, the British government was worried about the possibility of another popular rebellion. As the rebellion spread, intellectuals from Calcutta rushed to the indigo districts. The government set up the Indigo Commission to inquire into system of indigo production. The commission asked the Wrights to fulfill their existing contracts, but also told them they could refuse to produce indigo in future. Indigo production collapsed in Bengal. After the revolt, when Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa, a peasant from Bihar persuaded him to visit Champaran and see the plight of the indigo cultivators. In 1917, he visited, which marked the beginning of the Champaran movement against the indigo planters. So students, this was the end of the chapter, and I hope you have understood the complete chapter. I have covered all the topics, tried to explain in better and easy language. As I always instruct, I would again instruct this time you should read textbooks, the topics and the chapters very well. Always keep pencil in your hand, underline the hard words so that you can write them 5 times in your notebook. You can understand the chapter better if you read the textbook. Read the slides in the session. Listen to the video carefully. You'll have no problem in memorizing the question and answers, which will help you to score good marks in exams. So, with this topic, we end the chapter 3 and see you in session 2 for question answers. So till then, bye and take care.